How's it going, guys? For whom it may concern, the explanation for my inactivity regarding streaming is due to the fact that I have decided to go back to school. I decided to bring my gaming PC along, but dorms aren't big enough for two PC setups, and it's just a lot of work to set back up. Considering I won't find much time to game anyways. I could stream and game on that one PC, but I don't like playing with input delay, which is why I use two PCs for streaming to begin with. I can still make YouTube videos and do commentaries though. That being said, this will be a slightly different format of video from what I usually do. Sometimes I come home to visit every 2 or 3 weeks, and as I scrolled YouTube to kill time, some old God of War videos, or God of War Ascension multiplayer videos of 1v1s popped up on my feed. Upon seeing that, lots of fond memories kind of took residence in my mind, so I found the itch to play some God of War Ascension online again, and figured I wanted to make a video outlining my thoughts on the multiplayer experience, giving a retrospective look on it. I still have my old PlayStation 3 and my Elgato with my streaming PC at home, so I found time to record footage while playing again for this video. I have never done a video of this style and scale before, so please give me some grace, por favor. While you're at it, feel free to grab something to eat and drink, because it's going to be a long one.
Hard days, they don't say, God's changed my ways.
Now, as to how I got into this game, if memory serves me correctly, God of War Ascension was kind of a mixed bag in regards to how the story and gameplay fared against its contemporaries. That being God of War 3 in the the original God of War trilogy, rather. And at the time when Ascension came out, that was the latest installment of the God of War series. So it left many hungry for more, myself included. I didn't even do multiple playthroughs of the story for the Platinum Trophy or for the little Easter eggs because I wasn't necessarily interested enough to do so. So naturally, I went back and played God of War 3 if I wanted to scratch that hack and slash itch. Or I carried on by playing Call of Duty Black Ops 2 or Modern Warfare 3 at the time, as this was around 2013 when Ascension was released. It wasn't until one of my friends that I met playing fighting games a while ago. I think I met him playing Street Fighter Cross Tekken. It was a while ago. He hit me up telling me that I should try Ascension's multiplayer, and I didn't even know that the game had multiplayer considering that it's God of War. So I decided to look up some gameplay, and it kind of had me a bit interested and captivated. I saw the style that the Santa Monica Studios was going for, and it was very unique for its time. I wasn't really sold though until I saw that there was a giant community project in the form of a combo video that spans almost 13 hours of combo footage of every single weapon in the game. Combo videos for fighting games aren't uncommon, or it's not really a thing of mystery, but they don't really last anywhere that long, which tells me that there's a lot of replayability in gameplay variety. Another observation is that this game isn't marketed or even considered a fighting game, but possesses many gameplay and design mechanics that fighting game players will recognize and pick up on. There are immunity frames, parries. This game also has its weird version of a counter hit. I'll explain more on that later. There are hard knockdowns. There are frame differences between moves. There are these very niche interactions and combo conversions off of said interactions. I could go on, but you get my point. But it wasn't the mechanics that were anything special, because all of what I had mentioned are pretty standard mechanics in modern day fighting games. but how but it's how this game has incorporated these mechanics and added its own unique flair, which builds upon the complexity of play that this game is capable of showcasing and having. In this next segment, I will go more in depth into the mechanics of the game and do my best to outline and describe them with examples. As mentioned previously, How Santa Monica chose to incorporate these standard mechanics and put a spin on it is very underappreciated in my opinion. You'll start with the basics and gradually increase the complexity as we go on. You can play the tutorial and it would introduce you to these basic low level mechanics, such as quick attacks. As the name suggests, they are fast moves mainly used for poking pressure and interrupting a player's offense while serving as your natural staple for combo extensions. They inflict a minimal stagger on hit and can be parried. Then you got your heavy attacks, which have a long windup, but obviously inflict heavy damage and can stagger a player considerably to the point where it could give you a combo conversion. These attacks also serve as unblockables, so if it makes contact with the player holding block, it will break their guard and give you an opportunity for a combo. This would be the equivalent of Dragonov's running 2 in Tekken, where instead of his running 2 putting your character in this awkward guarding animation, it would just outright break your guard. You avoid these attacks by dodging or evading. There are also special attacks that are unique to every weapon that also consider the properties of light and heavy attacks. And then you got your physical attack with the circle button, where it's nothing complex. It's just a jump kick or a kick. Or if you sprint and press circle, it's a shoulder tackle. These attacks heavily stagger the player, but they can be parried, as they are not heavy attacks or considered heavy attacks. With that, I'll mention the defensive options too. You will be blocking a lot in this game, but you cannot rely solely on it. There's also a parry, where if you press block and X and guess the attack of a player and it makes contact at the moment of your parry, it will give you a combo. On the flip side though, if you guess wrong and parry nothing, the enemy can get a combo on you. I should mention that this game has a very interesting counter hit system, in the sense that if you interrupt your opponent's attack a frame before it comes out, it basically freezes their character on their screen and gives you a combo conversion. The problem, though, is that you wouldn't really know if you got a counter hit or not like you would in other games. Because in other games, when you get a counter hit, not only does it say it on the screen, you got a counter hit, but it also gives you a visual indicator and modifies the properties of an attack that counter hits an opponent. So the game tells you that you can do something with a successful counter hit. Whereas in God of War, only your opponent would know that they got counter hit because it would basically look like the game lagged or had a hiccup. I will do my best to showcase what it looks like from the perspective of a player on the receiving end of the counter hit.
Oh shit.
This game also has evades and sprint. These mechanics sound pretty standard, but here is the interesting idea behind them. There is another offensive option in the form of grappling. You cannot grab stationary opponents, only opponents who are either in evasion or if they are in a launch state from a combo. This is very interesting because it means that evasion isn't the end all be all defensive option. You may recall earlier how I mentioned that heavy attacks break your guard. The tutorial of the multiplayers has many flaws that I will expand upon later, but one of these flaws is that it doesn't teach the player about cancels. A cancel is pressing a button and then canceling the animation of that button or attack by pressing block. Heavy attacks have a glowing red aura, which tells the player that it's an unblockable, so naturally the player will do what the tutorial tells them to do, evade. With cancels being a thing, you can fake a heavy attack and bait the opponent to evade, which then allows you to punish them with a grapple that you can get a juggle off of. So if someone is trying to create space from your offensive pressure, you can play to deny that space. As stated earlier, this game also has special attacks, and those come with their own unique properties too. Most special attacks in this game have immunity frames that will always win a trade against a player mashing light attack on you. Think of those as if you've played Street Fighter, think of those EX or OD Dragon Punch moves that are often used as offensive interruption or recovery options. Just like an EXDP in Street Fighter is a risky option that requires expending some meter or some resources in the form of meter, in God of War, special attacks expend the resource of cooldown of that attack. Some cooldowns are faster than others, and they are also punishable if used incorrectly, because a lot of special attacks have a recovery frame where your character glows blue, and if you get attacked in that state, you're giving the enemy a combo. But a player has the choice of using these attacks for offensive pressure as well, or to try and interrupt someone else's offense, because as I stated earlier, if someone's mashing light attacks, you could use a special attack and it would win every time. Since this game has some pretty long and devastating combos, there are also combo breakers in the form of items. Using these items will free you should you find yourself in a combo, but these have very long cooldowns and a short duration. So you have to, I guess the game encourages you to use them wisely. Well, you basically have to. Since I'm on the topic of combos, I will briefly touch on a complex mechanic regarding combo extensions, which, if you've played fighting games, it's not necessarily complex, but with how Santa Monica incorporated a lot of mechanics, this is also a mechanic that they put their own unique spin on. Some weapons have special moves that bounce an opponent and will generally serve as combo extenders. However, the way in which the developers implemented these are quite interesting. For example, let's say I'm using the Maul of Poseidon in the gameplay that you see here. The special heavy attack is this chain based range attack that bounces an opponent and sends them flying back. If you use this on someone and it connects, they bounce up and down at normal speed. But here is where it gets interesting. If you have someone in a combo and then you time this combo extension, that the special heavy attack, and you time it to connect it with an enemy as they come in contact with the ground while they're mid combo, it will bounce them, but it will drastically slow the velocity at which they fall, which gives you a lot more time to continue the combo and basically give you an optimal version of that combo. Think of it as a perfect frame combo extender, which rewards you for precise timing on attacks. Some weapons with bounce-based special attacks all have this property, and it adds to the complexity of this game's combo system. You can also utilize the environment to your advantage as well, with wall bounces. Oh, and the mechanics list wouldn't be complete if I didn't talk about the infamous Rage Blades. These are essentially this is the catch-up mechanic of the game that the devs were nice enough to give to the shitters. It's basically the Blades of Chaos, and a player attains them by going on a death streak of 3 or higher. They do an insane amount of damage. If you are attacking with these, you experience 0 stagger from any attack from an enemy, unless it's with magic or a world weapon. When you hear someone swinging these around, you better run off in the opposite direction if you have nothing to deal with it. There are more mechanics, but I guess it would be considered technical mechanics. I will call back on these later on, but on that note, let's talk about the game modes that this game has to offer, and I will do my best to describe the gameplay loop within each game mode. I'm going to just start from the top here in terms of the game modes, because there's a decent bit of game modes. By decent, not that much, but enough to where there's a lot of variance. We'll start with Bout of Honor. Pretty standard, 1v1. Relics are disabled in this mode. When the round ends, you have full health and your magic recharges gradually over the course of a match. Pretty standard. And I think Bout of Honor might be the only mode in the game that has damage scaling. There's damage scaling is non-existent everywhere else. Next, we got Trials of the Gods, where it's basically horde mode, where you're killing creatures and mini bosses. And speed is the name of the game here. The faster you are, the higher tier that you'll get, the better rewards that you'll get, the more time that you'll also get for the next wave. There's Trials of the Gods co-op, where you can do it with another player, though I doubt you'll find anyone matchmaking this, because the game is just so old, and there's no real reason to play Trials of the Gods unless you really want to mess around. This is what you played if you needed XP and you didn't really want to go through the trouble of PvP, which, it served its purpose, all things considered. And next, we've got Capture the Flag, the best OBJ mode, in my opinion. It sucks that people would rather play, Team Favor of the Gods 4v4 than Capture the Flag, where you actually need to get the OBJ and, kills and grabbing chests don't matter. But Capture the Flag is fun for the very few times I got to play it. Next, we got Match of Champions, where it's free for all, pretty standard. The maps are chaotic in nature, and there's a lot of RNG because of a lot of the maps have environmental hazards and whatnot. And like I said, health and magic pools come up at various times. There's world weapons that spawn. It's just chaos, free for all with 4 people. Next up, we got the 8 version. We got the 8-man version of Match of Champions. Think of the free for all, but with 8 people on large scale maps. Next up, we got Team Favor, which is 2v2, a total of 4 players, but it's 2 players versus 2 on the small scale maps that you play in Match of Champions, where you earn favor, and it's just in a 2v2 team environment where you kill people, open chests, and do objectives. You earn favor, and that's how you win. And then last, we have Team Favor of the Gods. This is what most people in the game play. If you're going to matchmake a mode and you hope to find players, this is most likely where everyone will be. Sometimes you do find players in Match of Champions 4v4 or 2v2 in the rare occasion bout of honor. But if you're looking for bad guys to hit with your weapons, Team Favor of the Gods is definitely going to be the place because that's where everyone is. So, if you launch the multiplayer tutorial for the first time, the game will force you to select one of the 4 gods to ally with. You can always switch, though, later, whenever you want, but the tutorial will not allow you to continue until you select a god to pledge your soul to. I will start with Zeus, since he was the king of Olympus after all, but this is personally my least played god. I'm gonna be straight up with you guys. This is basically what the scrubs and shit cans of the game play. Zeus has a heavy emphasis on elemental powers and magic with a focus on silencing your opponents and stunning them. This is the class in which you basically spam your magic and all of the weapons and perks on this god revolve around elemental power and the silencing status effect. The main attraction for this god is a relic known as Asclepius. Asclepius? I don't know how to pronounce it. As you can see on screen, this perk essentially rewards bad players by giving them magic if their health is low. This is why I call it the scrub class. You get rewarded for being bad. This is essentially a glass cannon type of class, or allegiance or god, whichever you want to refer to it as, where your resistances are low, but your elemental capabilities are really high. Next up is the god that I first pledged with when I started playing the game, known as Poseidon. This god specializes in team support and damage resistance, as well as slowing the mobility of the enemy players by freezing them or slowing them with ice powers. On the flip side, though, this class has the least amount of physical damage in the game, and the weapons that are themed around Poseidon have more of an emphasis on keeping your team alive and being a support tank than actually dishing out devastating damage through combos. I guess this class has high elemental power capabilities with the godly war armor variant that you can pick, but there are only 2 Poseidon weapons that use elemental power, so it's pointless to build into elemental power unless you want to use these said weapons. I would say this class is one of the more honest ones gameplay wise, and I think that this is the best class for beginners who want to learn the fundamentals of neutral combat. With a lot of resistance and ways to slow the offense of your enemies, I think Poseidon serves as a great god to onboard new players to learn the ropes without the worry of getting hit with one combo and dying immediately. Next up, we have Ares, which is the most honest god to play. But maybe I have a bias because Ares is also my favorite. It's a glass cannon god or class that focuses heavily on physical attack power and chipping away your enemy's health with fire. Unlike Zeus, where you get rewarded for playing awful, on Ares, you can only get the benefits of extra stats by playing good and staying alive and getting kills. The items in Magic emphasize disabling the enemy's ability to defend themselves and doing giant bursts of damage in a short amount of time. This is the allegiance that most good players in the game most prefer to play, because the physical power is that high to where one well executed combo could kill a player if they do not have an item or the adequate resistances. Last but certainly not least, we finally get to the Hades alliance. I would say that Hades is the most well-rounded god of the three in regards to like statistics and resistances and whatnot, and physical and elemental power. And Hades might arguably be the best of the four. And as I said earlier, in terms of stats and attributes, Hades is kind of a balance of all the classes. But where it specializes at is the soul's magic kit of the class. Most of the magic and perks are basically for draining the life out of your enemies and reducing cooldowns of your abilities, or of your special attacks and item, so you could leech more and more health. That's kind of the loop. There are also some items and weapons that can stealth you and make you and your team invisible, but it's usually worthless against anyone who is half decent at the game compared to most other things. I think the real bread and butter of Hades revolves around the lifesteal and the curse debuff that you can apply to players. This debuff basically lowers your effective health by reducing your resistances, but the main reason people play Hades is for this combination of the Relic of Haste and the Hades Torrent magic. So the idea is that you use magic, and by proxy of using your magic, Relic of Haste gives you a speed boost when you use your magic. And with Hades Torrent, it steals life from your opponents while applying a curse in a massive radius that slows their movement and prevents evasion on top of lowering their resistances. This is the most disgusting combination in the game that has no real counter. Just look at this and imagine playing against multiple players using this combination.
Continue to impress me. Kill streak denied.
Hades is also a very popular option amongst good players as well, especially in the competitive environments. Overall, I'd say there's a lot of variety in ways to express yourself as a player through these four gods and their tools. By proxy of that, it also adds a lot of replayability. Have you finally decided that you don't want to be known as that resident shitter for being a magic spammer on Zeus? You can learn how to play the game on hard mode and garner honesty and respect from players by playing Ares for a change. Maybe you want to lean into support and keeping your team alive. Poseidon is right there and it's the best at it. Perhaps you love the color of purple and the flair of Hades because Hades is badass, let's be honest, with the soul's magic and whatnot. Even with only four gods, I'm taken back by how much replayability they offer. But another big aspect that supplements that replayability are the various weapon types, and I'll get into that momentarily here. Next, I want to talk about all the weapon types and the different gameplay associated with these weapon types. I'll start from the top down and from the top and work my way down to the bottom. First up, we have the sword weapon type. I imagine this is what most new players will use because it's the most straightforward and comfortable weapon. Think of swords as the equivalent to ARs in Call of Duty. You can't go wrong with using them, and they are pretty reliable in most situations you find yourself in. Swords have short to medium attack range, and they are very fast. The combos are pretty low effort and straightforward as far as the basic combos are concerned. You're going to straight chew through noobs with this weapon type who don't really have any grasping of what defense is like. But against higher level players, you will need to be more creative on your offense and defense. I personally find swords really fun and rewarding to use because I think swords have a low skill floor, but a very high skill ceiling, arguably the highest of all the weapons. The difference between a good sword user and an exceptional sword user can be seen very clearly. If you want to see the most of what a sword player is capable of, the best player who uses them is a Brazilian player by the name of Junin14. Hands down the best sword player to touch this game. A little tangent on Regent lore in this game, but me and some of my friends from the United States had beef with a handful of the Brazilian players, and he was one of them. I didn't really like the kid, but I gotta give respect where it's due. No one could play sword as well as he could. I was really good with sword myself, but if we were to go head to head with sword, he would be favored to win. I might be able to hold my own and give him a good match, but he would definitely be favored to win if there was some sort of parlay. Smart money's on him, not me. And that's pretty much all I gotta say about swords in that regard. Up next, we have hammers, which is without a doubt the best overall weapon type in the game for reasons I will outline here. Hammers have a lot of attack reach, and their attacks stagger heavily on hit, and their combos can be devastating. Their attacks have slow to medium speed, but what makes hammers special is their leniency of the canceling and defensive options. You may recall that I mentioned cancels as a mechanic of the combat in the game, and hammers are the best at it. This essentially means that the perceived disadvantage of a slow windup attack is null because you can cancel every attack you throw out. This allows for offensive pressure that can almost be considered unreadable when having an ironclad defense, or while having an ironclad defense. You can attack with massive range and damage while quickly canceling back into defense mode effortlessly. When players caught on to canceling, hammers quickly skyrocketed in popularity, but what made them unbalanced was when players discovered some tech known as quick launching. Noticed earlier when I said that perceived disadvantage of hammers were their slow attacks and launches? If you wanted to avoid the heavy attacks, you could do so by jumping if you didn't want to evade and have them guess correctly and punish it with the grapple. Notice the difference in speed between the intended slow heavy launch of the hammer that is supposed to help maintain its balance relative to the other weapons, and then look at the launch where it's very fast and quick. When players discovered quick launch, it changed the game completely. This was a maneuver that could only be avoided by dodging, or else you ate the launch because you can't block it. However, it could be cancelled, so if a player takes notice of your habits to dodge, they could grapple you and get a combo. So this created a dishonest, one-dimensional style of gameplay with the hammer, where the most optimal strategy was to learn and spam quick launch because everyone else was doing it. The quick launch strategy was better. It's better on some hammers than others because of their special attacks that could act as combo extenders off of mid-air launches. A very popular example of a hammer that could do that and kill off of one single combo conversion from a launch is known as the Maul of Ares. This hammer became a staple in the weapon rotation of many great players for two reasons. Firstly, this hammer is on Ares, and you may recall that Ares has the best physical power, so one optimal combo would kill most players without item. Second, this hammer has a special light attack that can sweep opponents off their feet and set them up for a lengthy combo. This sweep can also work on mid-air enemies. Take a look here. It also has Demigod, and your character becomes bigger with augmented special attacks and increased range for a short period of time. The sweep attack also has immunity frames, so not only can it be used for combo extensions, it can be used for offensive pressure as well, or an offensive recovery. So if you come across someone spamming light attacks, they will lose the trade 100% of the time. This hammer was already loaded with a lot, but with the addition of quick launch, you can get a low effort, low risk combo that can kill off of a single launch. If you look up God of War Ascension multiplayer 1v1 fights or tournament footage, this is the hammer you will see in most games. Not only that, but hammers are also the best for easy ring out kills on players. Moving along to the next weapon type, we have spears. On paper, spears seem like a very capable weapon type in competition. They are very fast, with lots of range and poking potential. In practice, though, they are by far the worst weapon type, and it's not even close. The reason for this is that their natural combos are very short and do lackluster damage. Not only that, but these combos, the uh, the basic and mid to advanced combos, are very difficult to pull off, and spears in general, in terms of neutral, are very difficult to use. And the reward does not justify the effort required to play well with this weapon type. Their offensive options are limited because their cancels are too strict. For example, you cannot cancel a launch with a spear, which leaves you wide open for a punishing combo because it's very slow. When I say the cancels are too strict, I mean they are too strict. Remember when I said heavy attacks display a glowing red aura? Well, if you want to cancel a heavy attack from spear, you have to do it very quickly to a point where the red aura might not even show. So it's not like you try and fake a heavy attack to get your opponent to dodge as a mix-up. And complex combos require high execution, only to do less damage than the beginner combos on other weapons. For example, I would use the Spear of Destiny, which is the best spear in the game in my opinion, probably tied with Lance of Poseidon, and perform the best possible combo with the spear. It is likely I will mess up because I haven't used a spear in about 6 or 7 years, so give me grace.
Prepare for the afterlife.
So at this point, I've probably failed 10 or 15 times before I finally got the correct combo, but I couldn't even do the full combo because the resistance of the enemy was so low. But that's what the advanced spear combos sort of look like on the surface. Spears are fun, I will say, but fun is all they will be because they're not very useful against great players, unless it's the Lance of Poseidon in team environments or the Spear of Destiny. I'm not sure what they could do to make spears more appealing, considering that the core design of spears is just flawed. The final weapon type on the list are known as gauntlets. Sound pretty straightforward. Think of brass knuckles, but they are heavy, blunt objects that model your fist in Greek mythological flair. Gauntlets are very interesting in their combat design in the sense that they specialize in defense and staggering counterstrikes that can set your enemies up for countless mix-ups and combos. Gauntlets have a heavy learning curve, so I would consider them a high skill floor, high skill ceiling weapon type. What really makes them special is this unique move that none of the other weapon types have. I can best describe it as an evasion capable of counter-striking with quick staggering unblockable attacks. Very concussive but slow light attacks, and the heavy attacks that pound the ground in a radius and bounces enemies. The specialty is the alternative evasion method, which functions the same as an evade, where all attacks will whiff on you during the animation, but the difference is that the golden halo does not appear above your head, so you cannot be grappled while you're in this animation. This makes for an unorthodox defensive style for players to try and find an opening in. I did not really consider learning gauntlets until I got tired of mid-ass players that were quick launch spamming me with hammers, because that's all they were good at. This was essentially my solution to hammers and quick launch, and once I took that offensive option away from players, it kind of exposed how bad they were with hammers in general. I kid you not, I'm not even trying to toot my own horn here. When I put on gauntlets and I could avoid quick launch and basically rip that offensive option away from them, most of them had no hope of beating me. I will say also that the reason that most players struggle to play against gauntlets, it's also because they are very uncommon as a weapon type to come up against. So it is a lack of matchup knowledge. And it's not like they could really lab against gauntlets because so few people play it at a good level. Gauntlets was the weapon type that was the ace up my sleeve when I really needed to perform and win because I knew what everyone else was going to do because they were playing with hammer, but they didn't know what I was going to do. Remember how I mentioned that some weapons have natural combo extenders that could give you a longer combo if timed correctly? Well, the gauntlets of Ares that you see here have that same capability. Granted, even if you mistime the bounce, you will still get a combo extension, just not the most optimal combo off of that extension, since you mistimed it. As mentioned earlier, this was my answer to hammers in quick launch, and it's won me a tournament, all because I learned something nobody labs against. To summarize, the weapons, sword is the low to medium range slasher with an easy learning curve, but a very high skill ceiling that demands finesse. Hammers are the long range concussive boulders that are overall the best weapon types in the game. Spear is fun, but its fundamental design prevents it from being viable in the top end of the skill spectrum, on top of the fact that most of the god themed spears are geared towards team support, not necessarily offense. And gauntlets are the unorthodox Greekified brass knuckles. I could have explored all the god themed and universal weapons, but this video is long enough already, so I'll leave y'all with this. I'll link the 2.5 hour long combo video that showcases multiple combos with every weapon in the game in the description. There are timestamps so you can skip to whichever weapon you are most interested in. In this next session, I want to give my analysis on the biggest flaws that held this game back from garnering more popularity during its time, from the bugs, the glitches, relative game balance as a whole, progression systems, netcode, weapon type identities, lack of private matches, and the developers not really giving it an honest to God chance. First, I want to start with the bugs of this game, and I guess netcode is tied in with this too. A lot of the mechanics of the game start to fall apart because of spotty netcode. Remember the glowing invincibility mechanic that's supposed to make you immune to attacks? You can attack a player out of it if the string of attacks are fast enough. This means that even after a combo is finished, you can maintain offensive pressure while doing damage. In other fighting games, it's not a new concept to apply pressure even on a hard knockdown, but at least you aren't losing, 25 to 30% of your health on a hard knockdown. If I could give an equivalent here, it's the equivalent of getting a hard knockdown in Street Fighter, but they could attack you and stand you up, so not only are you losing health, you don't really get time to breathe and gather yourself. And like I said, in God of War, you could deal an extra 20 to 35% of someone's health by mashing someone out of their invincibility frames. You could extend your combos in specific situations where you have someone in the corner. The invincibility mechanic does less for the player the more laggy it is. If the threshold is low enough, someone could do what's considered a lag combo and it will work. I will showcase some examples of this mechanic failing, even with perfect connections between players and with lag.
Miss. Another one? Another one? Oh my god. This guy.
1 minute remaining.
are honestly countless bugs, but most of them are silly and harmless, so I will talk about the game breaking bugs and glitches. One of these game breaking bugs and glitches is known as the infinite jump circle reset. This is basically the abuse of grappling at a specific point in a combo, where instead of getting the weapon specific grapple to end the combo, it will instead do the grapple where you grab your opponent by the shoulder and kick him across the ground because the game thinks you grappled a player that was evading. If it isn't obvious, you could reset someone to death and they can do nothing about it unless they have item or a magic ability that works while being launched. I rarely find myself using this because it's dishonest and scummy as hell and it makes people quit, like this guy. Another game breaking glitch that people used in competitive play is known as the item glitch. You may recall that items are used as get out of jail cards to break free from a combo, but on the flip side, they have a long cooldown. That is true, but not for all of the items in the game. Since the netcode in this game is very weird and spotty, you could get attacked out of your item, but this is advantageous because it will get you out of the combo without actually using your item. This is what it looks like. Most people do this on accident, but you can purposely item glitch if you tap your item at the moment an enemy's attack makes contact. This makes for frustrating gameplay because I would get a good read on an opponent only for them to get away for free. Someone did this against me in a tournament, by the way. I can't believe that this wasn't banned and against the rules because it's so scummy and cringe. And then I started BMing him because he just knows how scummy he's playing. It's a shame that this never got fixed. Next, I want to discuss the progression systems. On the surface, it's alright, but leaves a lot to be desired. You obviously get XP from playing the game, and if you get enough XP, you can ascend, which is basically like prestiging from Call of Duty. When you ascend, it resets you to level 1 and gives you a currency known as ascension tokens. These are what you use to buy the godly variants of the armor and weapons. They aren't really much different from their default counterparts, except that they give you a bit more stats on your gear, and it looks shiny. So your gameplay experience is unchanged, with the exception being that you could buy a themed Olympus weapon for 3 tokens. You got the Trident of Olympus from Poseidon, which is okay at best. You got the Blade of Olympus from Zeus, which is actually pretty good. You got the Warhammer of Olympus from Ares, which is one of the best weapons in the game overall. And finally, you've got the Claws of Olympus from Hades, which are badass, but decent at best. The problem is that it already takes a long enough time to get XP to ascend, and what you got to show for it is shiny armor and weapons that have slightly higher stats. I felt that the developers could have done more in the department of godly weapons and armor. What if on top of the extra resistance that the godly armor of Poseidon grants, it also granted a stacking intrinsic reduction to negative debuffs or status effects? So let's say a player puts a curse or a burn on you. Your godly armor would basically reduce the potency or duration of that debuff, and the more of that godly armor that you have equipped, the more it negates the debuffs. I thought of Poseidon first, considering it's the god where the kits and the gear revolve around being a tank and, survivability. The devs would have to think of unique modifiers for the other gods, but you kind of get my point. The idea of progression in a game is that you want players to feel like they are getting stronger and that their time investment matters. I think God of War's system missed the mark pretty heavily. The godly armor also presented another problem by making most other non-god themed armor obsolete. The stats are horrible, with the exception of the Manicore armor, and you wouldn't opt for these armors unless you were messing around, to be honest. The same criticism applies to the godly weapons as well. Functionally, they are no different from their non-godly counterparts. They just have slightly better stats and they just look shiny. Let's say, for example, all of the godly weapons of Zeus had a chance to inflict silence on the enemy when a heavy attack connects. This means that opponents would have to be extra mindful on their defense because getting silenced means that you cannot use your item or magic and it lowers your elemental resistance, which then means you take more damage to elemental based attacks, which Zeus specializes in. Just a simple idea like that already changes the gameplay on a very complex level and adds more depth to an already sophisticated combat system. As a result of this poor progression system, players feel no need to ascend more than maybe twice unless they want to collect all the godly armor and weapon pieces. And players don't like they don't feel like they get much out of the massive time sink required to ascend. Next, I want to go over weapon type identities and how many of the god themed weapons share similar attacks. For example, all of the god themed swords have a spinning based special attack. Many of the hammers have demigod and some spinning chain attacks, just to give some examples. While I personally don't mind this, I imagine that there is a lot left to be desired with the design of these weapons to separate them from one another. In regards to the DLC weapons, they put a lot of love into these. When you look at the DLC weapons compared to the godly themed weapons, you can see that the developers put a lot of love into these, functionality wise. But I guess they kind of had to since they're charging money for these. Because you do have to pay money for these weapons. It's not a lot though. I think it's 99 cents or something. It's nothing. But you're paying money nevertheless. The non-god themed weapons are the ones with the most variance in gameplay and combo styles and abilities. Just look at their special attacks and design. I wish the same effort was invested into weapons that take time to acquire through playing the game and progressing to quote unquote ascend. Right? Next, I want to discuss the grand balance of the game. In short, this game is an unbalanced mess. if it wasn't obvious already. One weapon type pretty much reigns over all else. There was no form of damage scaling unless it's out of honor, so oftentimes you could kill a player in a single combo, so that meant that a player could not make any errors, or they died in one, maybe two combos at most, depending on their stats. When it came to relics, items, and magic, there was always the obvious choice on each god that outclassed everything else. For Ares, it was the Inferno magic where you shot up into the air with immunity and came crashing down in a massive radius that did a ton of damage and imposed a negative status effect that would remove your ability to block if you were hit by it. The best item was Call to Arms, which sends a shockwave that removes your ability to block while also boosting your speed, so you were 20% faster for 12 seconds. And for the Relic, it was Relic of Determination. This basically gave you free elemental and physical power for every minute you stayed alive, and it gave you 20% per stack. With Poseidon, the favored magic was the Crest, where it sends an ice blast that bounces enemies and sets them up for combos, but I wouldn't say it's the obvious choice, as I'd say Poseidon has well-rounded magic options, not only just for solo, but for team players as well. The favorite item was Cloak of Boreas, where it shields you with a bubble that regenerates magic, and if popped, it would explode and slow enemies in a radius. I guess Salvation of Atlantis was okay too, where it basically gives you a water wall that protects you and prevents enemies from walking through it. The best relic was the Relic of Resilience, where it granted you bonus stats and health regen when your health hit a critical threshold. This basically meant that you could never be in the critical health threshold. So when someone's attacking you and it hits that threshold, you get plus 10 to your resistances, and it regenerates 1.5 points of health for every second that you're below that threshold. For Zeus, you had the Aegis of Zeus item, which basically gave you God mode for 4 seconds. For the relic, it was Asclepius. I can't say that word, man. That was the popular relic because it gave you magic for being low health, so your reward for being awful at the game was a constant flow of magic spam, with the magic of choice being Reckoning of Zeus, which was this bolt of electric energy that did moderate damage and silenced people. I wouldn't say this was the best magic option for Zeus, but it was the safest because it grants it 2 uses, and it lasts pretty long and covers a decent area. And we finally arrived at Hades. It should come to no surprise that the best magic was the Hades Torrent, which drains health and curses enemies in a large radius. Best item being with Wraithfang, where you turn into a mist that drains the health of enemies who cross paths with you. And last but certainly not least, the Relic of Haste, where using your magic makes you move faster. I know I rambled on, but this puts into perspective the lack of balance within the game when you consistently see people running the same item, magic, and relic setup. I'd say a big point of contention for folks that wanted to mess around or dabble in the competitive atmosphere was the lack of private lobbies or matches. You couldn't select the best maps to fight on for 1v1 tournaments, and for those tournaments, there has to be an official that is usually the tourney host that is recording. So what happens is that you have to go to Match of Champions to record 1v1s, and on the free-for-all maps, they have some randomness attached to them, which can disrupt the flow of a match. It's not like in Bout of Honor when the round ends either on time or by killing your opponent and then a new round starts where both players are full health. In Match of Champions, there are health and magic pools that spawn, and you could kill someone but not have health available. All things considered, we made the best with the tools we had, but man, it was really annoying at times that we never got private matches or some spectator system. Which probably leads into my last criticism of the game, with the fact that I feel that the developers did not give the multiplayer game an honest-to-God try. No pun intended. By Sony standards, the game didn't perform too hot as a whole, so I imagine they probably wanted to cut their losses short and move on, which is the smart thing to do. I mean, look at Concord, right? But hey, the servers are still up at least, and you can't say that for Concord. Count your blessings, because the streams don't stop. You heard? Jokes aside, I think this game with the proper care could have been a staple in the fighting game rotation for many people, especially for its time that it was released. Would it ever replace Street Fighter 4, Tekken Tag 2, Mortal Kombat, or Smash Bros? Probably not, but it could have provided a different and unique take within the fighting game space where it was its own thing, had the devs gone the extra mile with support and updates. Maybe this idea was too ambitious for its time. Who knows? This game didn't turn out to shake the world in any way, shape, or form. But one thing was for sure. It was fun and different compared to the conventional gameplay of your standard fighting games. I went from being a straight noob to winning a tournament and being crowned the best player in the world at one point. A climb that I almost thought of as impossible, considering that everyone I came across were veterans who had hundreds or thousands of hours on me. But I closed the gap and made it happen. But it wasn't all me. I had some help along the way, where some of the best players would take me under their wing and show me the ropes and give me the best practice, which kind of has me thinking of making another video where I do some sort of tier list where I rank the best players based on my opinions and give an analysis on why I think the way I do, as well as showcasing some of their gameplay, if I can even find it in the deep archives of YouTube. 24 pages later, and we have made it to the end. I know this is a different style of video, but the likes and scale of which I have never done before, so if you made it to the end, thanks for listening to me yap about a game experience few people knew existed. This took me several weeks to make, so if you would please consider leaving a like, giving your opinion in the form of a comment, and subscribing, I would be forever grateful. Looters signing off. Until next time.
3,000 favor to go. Refuel. Victory is at hand! You have earned my respect. One minute remaining. Nine, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Your influence grows throughout Greece.